Good morning, friends. Let's here with my morning coffee. Let me talk to you, my subscribers, my friends, maybe even a few enemies watching. I don't know what to say about that. But hey, if you're a friend, it's good to see you. If you're an enemy, hey, I'm still here, so screw you. It is 6:42 a.m. I woke up fairly early this morning, and I've cleaned up the place a bit. I've cleaned up myself a bit, washed last night's dishes, and made myself some coffee. And I'm finishing the last of the coffee. And I'm like, you know what? It's still technically a rest day. Monday was a gym day. Friday, was a gym day. I got up. I did martial arts that morning. I focused a lot on the ATA Taekwondo forms and the Goju Dao Te forms. But I did some Kung Fu body conditioning where I was, hitting forearm to forearm and striking wood targets with my handheld targets, palm, knife hand, fist, back fist, forearm, hitting this piece of wood that I held. Then I went to the gym, and also that morning before I got to martial arts, and I went out. I've been doing a different type of running recently. Getting out of the gym, not the treadmill and the stationary bike so much, because it is summer, it is beautiful outside. So what I generally do is a mile. I do 10 minutes at an easy pace. What for many of you would be an achingly slow pace, because I'm not a fast runner. And then what I'll do is 2-minute intervals where I will do 2 minutes at a faster pace and then 1 minute at a slow pace. And then on and on and on till the end of the run. Near the end of the run, I try to do the intervals faster, and 2 of the last rest intervals were walking, okay? And then I went to the gym, and I do a total body workout to include legs. So you can see we're doing this regularly 3 times a week for the past couple of weeks. I had to take Wednesday off because I was overtrained. But I'm adapting. So this morning is a Sunday, and normally I give myself Saturdays and Sundays off. Saturday completely off. I just ride my bike to get where I need to go, and I stretch a little, and I do nothing else. And Sunday I do a little bit. And then Monday we're back in training. So, interesting thing about Chinese martial arts and Qigong and things like that. First of all, I believe that there's a huge misconception and confusion in America and the West about those activities. I'll repeat the story again. I gave a workshop once. It was a group of white women, and one of them asked, what made you gravitate away from martial arts towards Qigong? And I said, I never did. Qigong and martial arts evolve together. They're always taught together. They're embedded in each other. Most Qigong moves, even something simple. If you're a martial artist, you recognize you're practicing a palm or a double palm strike, a double palm push. If you're an MMA guy, that's a post. Someone comes in to grapple and do close combat, and you post on them, and now you've got a hit. And some of the MMA guys are catching on to the fact that you can actually palm strike someone, all right? Imagine. So, originally, to learn Chinese Kung Fu, you learned Qigong. You learned meditative practices, breathing practices, the muscle tendon change classic, and what are called sinew changing exercises, and so on. And, of course, the body conditioning, the iron palm, the iron body, fingers tip training, sorely missing in many Kung Fu schools. It's a hard sell to have a beginner come off the street, a man or a woman or a minor, and say, all right, from day one, aside from the kung fu you do after class, you need to thrust your finger into into buckets of sand and pebbles, and you need to slam your hand against bags filled with ball bearings and beads and dry beans and gravel and things like that. So a lot of it's sorely missing, which is why a lot of kung fu today looks good but is empty. All right. And same thing with karate and taekwondo. In its original form, you were hitting makiwaras and bags, and they were putting what are called geita, which is a type of clog, but these had iron on the bottom as weight resistance, and so on and so forth. So, you look at the so-called fake martial arts, like Xu Shidong is beating these alleged kung fu masters that can't fight their way out of a paper bag. But then there's guys like Chilala rocking and rolling with their Wing Chun, right? There's a little bit more of this out there. I put up a sparring video on my channel a while ago, years ago, and it shows me and my senior student here in Missouri, Sam, sparring. And, we were using kung fu techniques, kickboxing techniques. We were mixing it up. We were trapping. And I sent it to Fight Commentary Breakdowns. And, he received my video, made kind of a weird comment. Like, he just tried to sell me a device to help you poop better. Maybe he was telling me I was full of shit. But that was legit sparring. We were doing semi-contact continuous. We did rounds, and we were hitting each other, but not blasting each other. The same intensity of any sparring he showed, but he never showed it. And I think, all right, well, that was a clear example of effective kung fu technique being pressure tested. It fit all his criteria. Never made its way to his channel. And I said, if that's excluded, I wonder how much is excluded. I wonder how many videos have been sent of people doing good kung fu under that level of pressure or higher, doing kung fu techniques, and he just never bothered putting it on for whatever reason, right? Kung fu has always had fighting aspects, and the southern schools are fiercely combative. The northern schools had a heavy influence in Sanda. But anyway, there are things that people perceive that kung fu doesn't have, like weight training. But I've seen videos of people in China in the 50s and 60s hefting around stone barbells and twirling them around their neck and lifting stone locks, which are similar to a kettlebell but a different shape. My teacher, Grandmaster Bonifacio Lim in Five Ancestor Fist, who I have a certificate with his signature on it, certifying me as a black sash, right? He used to bring in a heavy stone lock and flip it up and catch it and do different exercises. And that was all part of the training. And again, you don't see this a lot in commercial schools or even local clubs. And I think that's a loss and a diminution of Kung Fu, right? Karate comes here, and they took out all that stuff, and then they're like, well, we need to condition our hands, because obviously it doesn't exist in karate and taekwondo, although it did. They're like, let's put on gloves and hit the heavy bag and adopt boxing techniques so we can learn how to punch. But y'all never really learned the old way to punch, which is yet another way of effectively punching, especially without gloves on. And they're like, oh, there's no real conditioning. We need to add running, and we need to add, weight training. But resistance has always been part of the Okinawan method. And again, I've seen photos of dojos, even in the 1930s, that had barbells, dumbbells, traditional nigirigame, and that strange iron man-sized loop. All kinds of things. And running, here's the interesting thing about cardio in the Asian martial arts. People are like, well, They don't do any running. You have to understand, first of all, that these martial arts were developed in times before a car, and many of the people who were learning these arts, depending on the art, right, did not own a horse, right? Unless you have art specifically developed for cavalry, right? An art developed for an infantryman, like spear, broadsword, and some grappling techniques designed as backups. Things like Xingyi and some of the northern styles. Let's think about it, right? It's developed for an infantryman. They never bothered including running in the curriculum because every day they pick up their 80-pound combat load, put it on their back, and walk 10 to 20 to 30 miles a day. Sometimes a forced march even longer than that to get to an objective. Of course, they're not going to bother learning cardio. If you're a farmer, for example, living in Chen Village and you're learning the village art of Tai Chi, which, by the way, also had fast and strong movements and many weapons and resistance training, it was known, accepted that your cardiovascular system and your endurance was developed just by the lifestyle you led, right? So by transferring this to America, for example, let's say you're learning northern style Kung Fu, a traditional one that includes Tam Toi, the springy leg, a Muslim style, right? And maybe also Cha Chuan, another, popular northern style, popular with Muslims. There's Cha Chuan, Hua Chuan, right? And, a lot of these people learned in the off season of their farming, right? During the farming season, during planting and harvesting, they were very busy. They had long days. They had a lot of physical labor, and that was their main focus. Get the job done, grow the crop, protect it against animals and things like that. And then in the off season, this was especially true of barley farmers in North China. Barley isn't as labor intensive as, say, rice. Rice requires a lot of labor and cooperation between villages and so on and so forth. So say you're that barley farmer in the northwest of China or growing wheat or something like that. Then the growing season and planting season is over. There's a long time where there's not a lot of time-intensive work to do. And they would hire Kung Fu masters to teach the young men, especially in the village or the region, Kung Fu, to form a militia. They would learn their empty hand techniques, mostly as conditioning, and the staff and spear and broadsword and maybe rattan shield and so on. And a lot of this was that so the young men would be fit and healthy for the next starting season, because over winter there's, again, not a lot of planting and plowing. And also, there was no readily available police force or military force, and China was filled with bandits and bandit clans and warring clans, so you had to protect the crop. Imagine working all year long and you got the crop safely harvested and stored in granaries and whatnot, and all of a sudden, warlord shows up on his horse with his men on horses and some camels, and they brandish their weapons and they say, well, give me your crop, slaughter a few of those animals, and give me your gold, and thank you so much for your support. We'll be back next year, right? And that's also why certain rural communities have a lot of Kung Fu. I've heard many martial artists denigrate village Kung Fu as low level, as, that there's something bad about it. But think about it. It's a Kung Fu that maintains health, has viable, proven combat techniques in both weaponry and empty hands. Okay? Maintains fitness and strength for the needs of your daily life, and also provides the participants with a form of art, entertainment, and self-improvement. There is nothing low level about that. There's people that train the martial arts that struggle with those four aspects. Of course, there is more. There's also the factor that if you have a village and some outlying farms or several villages in a region that are involved in this activity far away from the imperial court, and the emperor's soldiers will not come every year to protect you from bandits because there's something else going on. Aside from the security you get a cohesiveness. Sometimes groups will come together and train under a particular master, right? And that will promote communication and unity amongst the young men. And I don't know if you know this, young men are probably as much of a danger to society as they are, a benefit or a pillar of society, right? I actually disagree with something I heard Jordan Peterson say. I disagree with most of what Jordan Peterson says. He lies a lot. He simply lies. But he says, the feminine women are the source of chaos. I don't know what planet that dude lives on, because let me tell you something. Young men are the source of chaos. Most of the chaos and destruction in this world is men, right? And a lot of it is young men that don't have guidance, right? Don't have proper outlet and instruction for what to do. They don't have a good example from their elders. That's also something, right? And men are chaos. Young men are chaos. Again, some of you are going to hate me for this, but young teenage boys in their 20s, and men in their 18 and above, boys in their teens, you take a whole bunch of them and just put them together in isolation for about a month without supervision. There's going to be bodies. There's going to be murders, right? Even rapes, right? And if it's a group of young black men, it'll be more. It'll be worse, because there's a lot going on in that community, right? And I don't think it's a genetic thing. I think there are things going on in this world. There are legacies of past treatment and events, and internal and external influences in different communities, and they do differ by race, by nation, so on and so forth. If you want to call me racist, go ahead. It's just life, man, right? So yeah, that's another benefit of that martial art. So if you think that there is no place for cardiovascular training, for fitness training, for muscle training in Tai Chi, in Kung Fu, in your Qigong practice, you are sorely mistaken, because the population that developed it, cardiovascular development and muscular development were part of their way of life for the most part, right? And as a footnote, I will add, you will not have the hardest workouts I've got in martial arts, the most taxing, were in Chinese martial arts. In Shaolin Chuan Fa Silam Pai Quan, when I was learning that, many classes began with extensive calisthenics and laps, lots of laps, right? Master Leon Trescott, he didn't do a lot of laps, but we would do a lot of end-of-class calisthenics, and he was really into fitness. He would push he made fitness requirements part of testing requirements. A certain number of push-ups in the beginning, and squats, and then later on fingertip push-ups, leg lifts, V-ups, jumps, jumping tuck jumps, and jumping splits. When I started training with the Chinese, all right, Master Lim was not huge on fitness conditioning. You just got into doing the tension forms and techniques. You did them over and over and over again, and then you work two-partner drills where you bash forearm together. He was into that iron body conditioning. But when I trained in Chinatown with Xian Gao and Zhang Yuan, those were incredibly physical classes. You started out with laps and then sprints, then backward sprints, sideward sprints, a sort of burpee sprint where you be in a full squat position and jump forward and land in a full squat and then jump forward and land, and then cartwheels and somersaults. I could never pull those off, right? I was in my 30s, but the kids were doing it. And then lines of stretch kicks, the very fancy wushu kind, then jumps, then, all types of jumping splits, and then, right, on and on and on. And then the forms were long and complicated, and he started with very short, simple drills, and it was just relentless. It was nonstop. You couldn't wait for the class to break up into the more advanced forms, and you got to go off in a corner and practice the new form or the new form segment by yourself because you got a bit of a break. You started to recover, right? I don't know what the heart rate was that I was achieving, but it had to be beyond my target heart rate, okay? So, yeah, that's the place of cardiovascular training and fitness training in Chinese Kung Fu. So if you have a day where you don't get to do your Kung Fu, but you go out, and I'm about to go ride my bike right now, you go out, you get a jog or something, and you do a few calisthenics, you are doing your internal training, your Kung Fu training, your Tai Chi training, your Qigong training. You are. It's always been there since the beginning. And of course, if you do your cardio on your bike and all that stuff, and you go for your run and you come back and you stretch and you do a few breathing exercises and a few slow martial arts movements after you stretch, you have gotten a martial arts workout with the emphasis on the body development. Your chi flow, your internal development cannot happen in a body that you haven't bothered doing some type of quote-unquote external training. But your cardio, that's internal, baby. That's going on inside your body, and there's very few organs as incredibly critical as the heart. You can get shot and lose part of your brain and keep on living, but that heart stops. That's a hard stop. That's a quick stop. I would know. All right, y'all have a good day.